Thank you. I want to thank the chair and ranking member for convening today's hearing, and I want to thank the nominees for participating in this important conversation. Chairman Pai, I want to thank you for offering to meet with me yesterday, but as you can tell, I had a really terrible cold, and yesterday I sounded like Chewbacca. We would not have had a good conversation. I'm hoping I head into Kathleen Turner territory here soon, but I'm transitioning. Chairman Pai, last month, a federal court struck down regulations that cap the soaring cost of phone calls made by prison inmates. And I know that my colleague, Senator Booker, has asked a question about this as well. In that 2-to-1 decision, the U.S. Court of Appeals with the D.C. Circuit stated that while rates charged for in-state prison calls could be extraordinarily high, the FCC exceeded its legal authority in 2015 when it created rate caps for such calls. The FCC initially prepared a legal defense of its decision, but abandoned it earlier this year after you became chairman. And in a June 13 article in the New York Times, they attribute this decision to you. Chairman Pai, am I correct that in opposing the Commission's efforts to protect families and inmates from outrageously high rates for calling services, you were not endorsing astronomically expensive prices? Rather, you simply believe that Congress has not provided FCC with the authority to impose rate caps on intrastate prison calls?
Correct, Senator. That is a purely legal position that we took, and I would welcome additional authority should Congress see fit to provide it.
Thank you. So looking ahead, I plan to work with my colleagues to help address that issue. And in fact, I plan to introduce the Video Visitation and Inmate Calling in Prisons Act to rein in the often ridiculous prices prisoners and their families are forced to pay to communicate. The bill would provide the FCC with clear authority to institute common sense rules for video visitation and inmate calling services, including capping outrageously high rates, and would require the Bureau of Prisons to institute long overdue rules to make sure video visitation service contracts are effectively managed and overseen. If enacted, this good government, consumer-oriented legislation will help establish video visitation as a supplement to and not a replacement of in-person visitation, with the ultimate goal of reducing recidivism through increased family contact and regular communications. I believe that this legislation would address your concerns about clarifying FCC authority when it comes to prison calling services. Will you commit to working with me to pass this legislation during the 115th Congress?
I will, Senator. I look forward to working with you on it.
Thank you. And I believe, Mr. Carr, you had previously committed to this as well. And I'd like to give Commissioner Rose, both of you, the opportunity as well.
Absolutely, I would commit to working with you. I mean, the number that sticks with me here is there are 2.7 million children in this country who have a parent in prison. And we know that recidivism is affected by the ability to stay in close contact with family. So I think it is imperative that the FCC continue its work here, and I would work with you in any way to make sure that that legislation is successful.
Thank you. Mr. Carr?
Yes, Senator, I agree. I would welcome the chance to work with you on this issue.
Thank you. Ms. Rosa-Marcel, on June 22nd, President Trump announced that his infrastructure proposal will promote and foster enhanced broadband access for rural America. According to the FCC's 2016 Broadband Progress Report, 56% of rural Illinoisans lack adequate broadband service, as opposed to only 4% of urban communities in Illinois. Ensuring that every Illinoisan has reliable internet access to find a job, improve their businesses, or educate their children is a top priority. And in fact, many of our kids can't do their homework because they don't have broadband. While we still haven't seen any actual details on the administration's infrastructure package, several accounts suggest it will rely heavily on various forms of tax incentives to encourage providers to deploy and upgrade broadband in rural areas. And some have expressed support for using Connect America Fund as a mechanism for distributing potential infrastructure funding. Is this an appropriate mechanism, the Connect America Fund, and how would you modify the program to accommodate this role to ensure that funding injected into the system supplements industry investments and does not actually take over?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. It's an important one and also complicated, so let me try to give you a quick answer. I think what is most important to me here is something I mentioned to one of your colleagues earlier, that if there are additional programs as a result of an infrastructure package, it is absolutely imperative that we think about how they work in conjunction with the FCC's annual $4.5 billion fund for universal service. I think it's imperative that the right hand talks to the left and we don't duplicate efforts or somehow wind up with policies that crowd out private investment that would have occurred without that spending.
Thank you. Chairman Pai, along with your fellow commissioners, you've highlighted the importance of consensus-based decision-making at the FCC and expressed frustration about delegated authority. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, Senator.
Thank you. You issued a press release in December of 2014 with Commissioner O'Reilly about these concerns. And similarly, Commissioner Clyburn expressed frustration earlier this month about learning that the FCC approval of the Sinclair-Benton deal, about learning about through a press release. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a 2014 press release from Chairman Pai and a July 2017 tweet from Commissioner Clyburn.
Without objection.
Thank you. In August of last year, the FCC voted 3-2 to adopt new disclosure requirements for shared service agreements. Is that correct?
I believe that date is correct, yes.
So subject to approval by OMB, each broadcasting station that is party to a shared service agreement, whether in the same or different television markets, would be required to file a copy of the SSA in its online public inspection file. Chairman Pai, did FCC withdraw its request to OMB to approve the collection of SAA information on January 27, 2017? And if so, why? And does the FCC plan to resubmit its request to OMB?
Senator, I confess I'm not familiar with that particular information collection at this point, but I'm happy to get back to you with a status report on where that information collection stands.
Thank you. Commissioner Rosenworcel and Mr. Carr, were you aware of that development?
Because I no longer serve at the agency right now, I don't have up-to-date details on that, but were I confirmed, I'd be perfectly happy to follow up with you and provide you with more information.
Thank you.
I think, Senator, similarly, I don't recall right now the specifics of that one.
Okay, well, thank you all for being very kind. And again, Chairman Pai, I apologize for having to cancel our meeting yesterday. You've been very generous, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.